DTC and Sephora natural beauty company, Briogeo, here with us. So before we get started, just a little bit about thUp. So for thUp, we aim to bring inspiration, empathy, and connection to each person carving their professional path forward towards a more diverse and equitable world. Through storytelling and conversation, we're really looking to demystify how success can be achieved, certainly in a professional path. Each month, we're going to sit down and zoom in for a conversation with an inspirational voice to hear stories and insights and removing that veil in finding a path up. So with that, let's get started, and feel free to throw some chats or questions in the window, and we'll kind of kick it off from there. So thank you so much for being with us today, Nancy. Oh, Nancy, you're muted.
There we go. Sorry, the host had to do it. Hi, Zach. So happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so honored to be a part of your first episode, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, we couldn't have thought of a better choice. So, yeah.
Awesome.
So with that, Nancy, would you mind just kind of to start off, tell us a little bit about your path up and your professional story?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started Briogeo, which is a clean hair care product line that sells at prestige retailers like Sephora and Nordstrom. I launched the company in 2013. And I get asked the question oftentimes, why did I start a hair care product company? You know, are you a stylist? Are you a chemist? And the answer to that is no. I actually started my career in finance back in 2007 after graduating from the University of Virginia as a finance major. I had actually done 2 summer internships at Goldman. So I was kind of on the path into finance while I was still an undergrad. And I chose finance as a major because it was the closest, kind of offering to what would be a business degree, because I've always had an entrepreneurial itch, and I was so curious to learn more about how businesses functioned and operated and ultimately achieved success. So I thought, taking some summer internships at one of the world's largest investment banks like Goldman Sachs would give me a pretty good insight into that. So I joined Goldman in 2007, which, if you can remember, 2007 was a very treacherous time for the finance industry, with Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers going out of business, but also the financial crisis affecting a lot of North American corporates, many of which who were some of our largest clients. I was on the commodity sales and trading desk at Goldman, and we would help North American corporates hedge their commodities exposure. So if you were General Motors, you're purchasing a lot of aluminum to make your cars, and the price of aluminum changes on a day-to-day basis, an hour-to-hour, second-to-second basis. And basically by using derivatives, you could lock in a price today for something that you need in the future. So that was kind of the core function of my role. But it was a really challenging experience because of the time in which I joined that business, with a lot of our clients on the brink of bankruptcy. So I was learning a lot about credit, and I was doing a lot of things that I otherwise probably wouldn't have done. But what I would say is, very early in my career, I kind of realized that role that I was in at Goldman just wasn't something I was excited about. I didn't feel like it was really fulfilling my entrepreneurial itch. And I was learning about business, but in a very kind of specific sector that wasn't as kind of general and broad. And so from there, I kind of knew that ultimately I was going to want to make a career change and do something different that I was more passionate about, but at the time I just didn't know what.
Fair enough. No, I can imagine that was very helpful in your entrepreneurial journey, just all of the chaos of 2008, 2009. Mm-hmm. So talk a little bit about that. Was there something that was like a very big takeaway or super valuable, almost something you didn't even expect from your finance experience that was super valuable in getting Briogeo started, either early days or down the line?
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's interesting. I feel like I definitely learned a lot of skills that were so transferable to what I do now with Briogeo, in terms of, having to negotiate with clients, having to, present in front of large groups, having to, come up with strategic solutions to unique challenges. There's like a whole laundry list of, skills that I developed over that 7-year period that certainly come up on a day-to-day basis in running Briogeo, even though the subject matter is completely different.
So tell us a little bit about what was like the kernel for Briogeo. Where did you, is this something you started when you were at Goldman, or is it something that you started kind of after you left?
Yeah, so it was actually a project that I started at Goldman. Halfway through my career at Goldman, unfortunately, I lost my mom. And it was a sudden thing, nothing that I was, prepared for. And it was the first time that I had lost someone close to me. And it really kind of changed my perspective on, risk taking and going after your passions and really finding a career that aligns with what makes you happy. And so after that moment, I started doing a lot of soul searching to kind of think about what my passions were. And I have a unique family background in that my mom was a chemist and a doctor. And growing up, we used to make a lot of our own natural beauty products in the kitchen of our home using ingredients that we would source from our local health food store. So at a very young age, I had experience actually taking clean natural ingredients and transforming them into all sorts of highly effective beauty products. And so when I was thinking about what I wanted to do next, I knew how much I loved creating my own products, but also there was a, evolution that was taking place in personal care, similar to the change that happened in food, with more consumers becoming health conscious, prioritizing, natural foods, organic foods. The same thing was starting to happen in personal care with how people shopped for their products. And so knowing that that shift was not going to be a trend, but really kind of a fundamental way, and how people would, change their decision making around the products that they purchased, I just saw a great business opportunity to actually take something that I love doing and actually turn it into a company. So ultimately, that's how the idea of Briogeo was created. And I ended up spending, my time outside of work, my nights and weekends, working on building a business plan and developing the first 4 products that we ultimately launched with in 2013.
Nice. That's really, really, really exciting. So did you find that your business plan was, did things go according to the business plan, or did, and talk to us a little bit about what was that like? Even just like formulating a business plan and like the strategies behind that, or did you find that, hey, I just had to throw that business plan out the window after a couple months?
Yeah, actually, maybe contrary to how a lot of businesses kind of come to fruition, I think, I really did stick to the business plan, or at least that's kind of how things unraveled in terms of, wanting to launch in major retailers like Sephora and Nordstrom, being able to expand our product line to, cater to so many different hair textures and types and ethnicities. But so much of that vision really did come to fruition, which is why I think it's always important when you're starting a company to have a North Star for what it is you want to do, because it helps you to make decisions that ultimately align with that vision. It kind of becomes like, the address that you type into a GPS. You don't often know how you're going to get to the destination, but at least you know where you're going, and you'll hopefully, make the right twists and turns to get you there. But yeah, a business plan and having a mission for what it was that I ultimately wanted to accomplish was really key.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think one thing that'd be really interesting for our listeners is to understand, how did you go about, like, did you self-fund the company? Did you raise capital? Like, what did that process look like?
Yeah, so I had, fortunately saved up a good deal of funding through my time at Goldman. So I was able to self-fund for quite a long time. I had a small angel investor contribute early on to help with a specific project. But not until last year did I take private equity investment. So we were luckily pretty profitable early on, where we were able to eventually self-fund and get a bank loan. And then last year I brought on a private equity partner.
Oh, wow. Very cool. What's that process been like, kind of bringing in a private equity partner?
Yeah, it's been really, really positive. They've been much more than just a financial partner, but they've really helped me to think about evolving the strategy of the business, building the right team to help us accomplish our goals and scale the business. In addition to just, tackling some of those day-to-day challenges that come up and being able to rely on a partner that has so much insights from what's happening at their portfolio of brands, just brings such a comprehensive perspective in terms of, helping to problem solve and to, develop the right solutions to whatever it is we're going through.
Nice, nice. So now having the benefit of hindsight, is that something that you would have done if you could go back in time and had a magic wand? Would you have done that sooner? Would you have done that differently?
No, I think our timing was right. I definitely don't recommend that people just take on investors unless they actually need it. And we didn't need it. From a financial perspective, we didn't need it. It's a quick way to kind of dilute yourself as a owner of the company. And also too, sometimes if you take on investment too early, it doesn't allow you the kind of creative freedom to, build and learn at your own pace because you're kind of forced into, a little bit of a playbook depending upon who you partner with. So I feel like we took investment at the right time. Again, I recommend, everyone, it's different. Some people need to take investment early on because they don't necessarily have savings to pull from, and that makes total sense. But I think when it comes to that, always trust your gut and always, keep a close, eye on your financial situation so that you have a, realistic idea of how far your existing, cash can actually get you.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Was there ever a time like through that process where you were speaking to all these different investors, either in the early days or later on? Did you ever feel like you weren't getting like a fair shake, or people treated you differently at all for being a female entrepreneur or being from a minority group?
Yeah, fortunately, I feel like I have been coming up in an era in which a lot of, investors and other organizations are actively seeking out ways to enhance the diversity of their portfolios and of the types of companies that they fund. So from that perspective, I feel like, everyone that I looked to partner with was really eager to partner with not only a brand that was, succeeding from a growth perspective, but also, with a leader that has a diverse, background and perspective. So I'm really fortunate, and I think I continue to see that trend continue where, so many funds are really prioritizing, expanding the diversity of who they partner with.
Sure, no, that makes a lot of sense. So 2020 has definitely been a unique year. Can you just talk to us about what has it been like steering the ship of Briogeo during COVID and all of like the all the social issues we've been dealing with as a country? Tell us a little bit about like how you've handled that and what are some kind of key takeaways from it?
Yeah, I think, similar to so many companies out there, most of us are working remote. So we're kind of navigating, the new culture of collaboration and teamwork in a virtual environment. I will say that there are a lot of aspects of what we do at Briogeo that are, creatively driven. So, in the past, that kind of was realized, and being able to, sit next to the creative team and actually look at physical, copies of packaging and artwork and, make decisions together. So we've certainly had to adjust to kind of this new climate of collaboration. But I think it's going really, really well. And, with technology like Zoom and other creative platforms, Slack, et cetera, we've been able to really overcome some of those hurdles quite successfully. We've also been fortunate in that we've made some significant investments in digital pretty early on. That's allowed us to kind of recapture some of the brick and mortar exposure that we lost, in the early days of COVID, and that to some degree still exists because a lot of consumers are still mindful about shopping in person. But I think that, the kind of overarching response has really been a shift to digital. So people haven't just stopped, spending in personal care because of COVID, but they've just changed the methods by how they shop.
Gotcha. So they're still consuming, just a different way that they're executing that consumption.
Exactly. That's right.
Very cool. Talk to us a little about, we touched a little bit on diversity there, and there's so many companies, and I think for our listeners that are thinking about, how their organizations approach diversity, how they approach inclusion. How do you think about that as you think about Briogeo now and you think about Briogeo 3-5 years down the line?
Yeah, definitely. We did some diversity stats work over the summer, and the results were very positive, relative to some of the industry benchmarks, but we know that there's always an opportunity to improve. I've analyzed a lot of the historical ways that we've, recruited. And so oftentimes a lot of people will come to Briogeo based on referrals from people that work at Briogeo. So it's like, oh, I have a friend who I used to work with at this company that's like an expert in what we're looking to hire. And you kind of just bring them in. And when you do that, you kind of, bypass the opportunity to be able to see a much wider, diverse spectrum of candidates. So we've had to be a lot more thoughtful about instituting more structure around that. It's great when people are able to recommend people, but let's make sure that we are, creating a hiring process that allows for us to see as many diverse candidates as possible. We've partnered with some strategic groups like 25 Black Women in Beauty, who have a phenomenal career board where they're able to get our, job listings in front of a very diverse, targeted, relevant audience of applicants. So a lot of the focus is really just making sure that when we're, posting new job opportunities, we are able to bring in, as many diverse candidates as possible so that we can have a very thorough and inclusive hiring process. And as we continue with those efforts, we're also looking to make ongoing D&I training just a part of the culture at Briogeo, because everyone kind of has varying levels of education and context into what, equitable diversity and inclusion really, really means. So working with some experts to not just conduct, a one-time training, but making sure that it's ongoing so that even as new employees and join Briogeo, we're able to ensure that we're constantly evolving the culture in that respect.
Very cool. Do you find that you're still able to, when you have new team members join, can they still get that culture of Briogeo even remotely, and you've found ways to really imbue that when they can't sit next to each other like in an office?
Yeah, it is tough because I think, as time evolves, it has become harder because a lot of people really do have Zoom fatigue. It's like you're on Zoom all day. And, I think in the beginning when we were doing, Zoom happy hours and things like that, people were excited about it. But over time, some of this, virtual interaction and eventing does become a bit exhausting. Whereas, in person, when we had new team members or celebrations, we were able to kind of keep things fresh and fun and dynamic by, switching up our celebration venue or, having some new fresh activation to, host the experience within. So I think that has certainly been a challenge. I think, now that we enter month 7 or 8 of this life, it really requires a lot of innovation in terms of how you keep people engaged. But yeah, it has been an interesting experience because we have hired quite a bit during COVID, and the fact that many of those new hires have never met some of their closest collaborators in person is certainly a unique thing. But we're all very, very connected. I don't think that there's anyone who goes a whole day without seeing a team member virtually. That just doesn't happen. We have been very thoughtful about making sure that we have the right meeting structures so that everyone feels connected, no matter what, level or part of the company they work in.
Yeah, for sure. Do you find that there's other like positives too, that people are like they're healthier, they sleep more, they exercise more, like they get to use meditation apps, things that I guess maybe they wouldn't have had an opportunity to do if they're doing like an hour commute one way, an hour commute the other?
Yeah, I think it's mixed. I think some people probably feel like they're working more because they just kind of get up and go straight to the computer, and then they kind of work through what would have been their commute time. And then some people have just been a lot more, I think, intentional and structured about using that time to create more balance. But I think it's definitely a mixed bag. I think you'd have some people that would say, I'm actually working more. And then some people that are saying that, they do have that balance. For me personally, I feel like I'm working more. There's just a lot going on. So I have to be very mindful about, carving out the time, the extra time that I have to, really focus on my stuff.
Yeah. So before I dive into the topic, I kind of know, I don't think I've ever asked you this. Where does the name come from, Briogeo?
Yeah. So naming a company can be really tricky because there are so many trademarks on so many different names, and it's a very complex thing. And not only that, even if you do have a trademark, someone else may have the same trademark in a different class. So when you Google search that name, there's just a lot of noise there. So I actually ended up working with a consultant to help me, one, find a name that wasn't trademarked in my class so that I could actually legally use the name. But then also I wanted a name that like no one else had, so that we truly owned it top to bottom. And so part of the exercise in coming up with some name options was really a deep dive into the brand's DNA. And as I mentioned, Briogeo is a clean hair care product line that really celebrates the diversity of all hair textures and types. So the word brio is an Italian word that means vibrant, colorful, full of life. It really celebrates and embodies, diversity and uniqueness. And the word geo is a Latin word that means of earth or of nature. And that speaks to our clean ingredient methodology. So the word Briogeo really kind of encompasses who we are from the inside out.
Nice. So to talk a little bit about, the Briogeo expansion, I think one of the things that was exciting for me is when I mentioned that we were interviewing you for our inaugural thUp in conversation event, I got text messages from a lot of people, primarily women, who were like, oh, I love Nancy's products. So
Wow.
I'm not just saying that. So I guess my question for you is, when I travel to, say, Egypt or Japan, are people stop me and be like, do you know Nancy Twine? So is Briogeo in those markets? What does the expansion look like? Is there expansion beyond existing hair care products into all different kind of categories?
Yeah, so Briogeo is a global product line. So we sell our products throughout Europe, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. And we've been really fortunate in that we've been able to extend our longstanding partnership with Sephora and these different international locations. But we do have retail partnerships with other retailers beyond just Sephora internationally. So yes, we are a global brand. And it's been really exciting to see the evolution of our client base expand beyond just North America.
Gotcha. No, that's super helpful. So
Mhm.
take a step back and to talk a little bit about the current climate we're in, planning for the future, the existing kind of social conflict. We've got this chaotic political set of circumstances where who's our next president? We're not exactly sure yet as a country. And I think what's really interesting in these times is you've got lots of different messages coming from business leaders, whereas maybe 50 years ago, 100 years ago, business leaders might have just stayed out of politics entirely and thought, you know what, I've got customers on both sides of the aisle. Now we see things from the CEO of cryptocurrency exchange, Coinbase, saying things like, we are an apolitical company. If you're not interested in being an apolitical company, please leave. And then we have the CEO of the expense company Expensify saying, you need to vote for this candidate for these reasons because democracy is on the line. How do you see that currently? How do you see that for yourself and for Briogeo?
Yeah, I mean, the truth is, I don't know the political demographic of Briogeo. I guess most companies don't know that precisely, but what I can say is that Briogeo serves a diverse client base. And when I say diverse, not just from an ethnicity perspective, but background, socioeconomic, geographic, and I'm sure ultimately politically. So when I talked about earlier, the fact that Briogeo very early on has been very clear and adamant about what our values are and what we stand for, that really drives, everything that we do. Part of our mission is to be a company that not only harnesses clean ingredients, but also prioritizes sustainability. So things like climate change and, environmental priorities is something that we're passionate about and what we stand for, no matter what your, political stance is. So we really focus on communicating around our values as opposed to, on our Briogeo platform, taking a political stance. Now, on my personal platform, I take a political stance. So if people are curious about what Nancy is up to and what Nancy thinks, you can, follow me on Instagram and learn, everything about what's in my head. But from a brand perspective, we really just focus on amplifying and communicating what our core values are.
No, that makes complete sense. Thank you for highlighting that. So as you think about currently, what are some of the big challenges for entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds? What advice do you have for them? And what do you think that kind of looks like over the next 3 to 5 years in terms of challenges that entrepreneurs from diverse backgrounds may face?
Yeah, I think, a challenge that a lot of aspiring diverse entrepreneurs sometimes face is not seeing enough people who have succeeded doing what it is they want to do. And oftentimes, the path to success, a lot of it is psychological, right? Like if you see a lot of people who look like you doing what it is you want to do, kind of psychologically, you at least feel that it's possible and that, the path forward is there. But for, certain people that don't have enough examples of people who look like them succeeding, sometimes, it can create self-limiting beliefs, which oftentimes are the things that limit us from reaching our true potential, which is why, despite having a really, really busy schedule, I do try to make it a priority to make myself available to other diverse, minority, female entrepreneurs in the beauty space that are looking for advice and that are looking for guidance. I hope to be able to serve as an example that, if I can do it, you can do it too, no matter who you are. And I just think it's really important that all of us, really need to help pave the path forward for others, even if the people that you're mentoring don't look like you or have a totally different background than you. Because at the end of the day, we're all human. We all have ideas. We all have dreams. We all have passions. And I really believe that any one of us can do whatever we want to do. And so much of it really is predicated on just having the right mindset. And so the more that we can do, especially, Zack, you and I being in a place of success, being able to help mentor and motivate other people and help show them the way, I think is such an important part of that.
Thank you for putting me in the group with you, Nancy.
Well, it's true. It's so true.
So to that, so did you have, I think about, who's an inspiration for myself. Did you have a specific person that you really looked up to, or was it like a group of people, or did you just kind of find that self-motivation?
Yeah, I think I found the self-motivation for sure. I do think, my mom certainly influenced me. My mom ran a very successful medical practice for many years. So in a lot of ways, she was a business owner. She was an entrepreneur and she was super successful and she was, running things and doing it. And so I think, as a young kid, seeing her succeed and seeing her, confidence and just going after her dreams and ideas, I think really, instilled it inside of me that even if I didn't have like a, specific idol who looked like me in beauty, fundamentally, I knew that if I had an idea or something I was passionate about in any category, like, you just go after it. And I know that not everyone has that. Not everyone has like those early childhood examples that perhaps has, innately instilled that mindset, which is why, again, I just think, the mentorship piece is so important, because you can be anywhere at any age in your life and, still find kind of, your new support system or idol or mentor, whatever you want to call it, to help you achieve the right mindset, that, what you want to do is possible with the right, work ethic, with the right, strategic plans, and with the right attitude.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I think would be great to hear about is sometimes I've gotten discouraged when I've heard from female executives who are thinking about reaching for that top role or putting their hat in the ring for promotion or joining a growing company or starting a business. And well, how can I juggle both family and business? Like where so often, mothers have to like do double time work and are taking a lot of that extra burden at home. Is that something that you've kind of ever given a lot of thought about, like for yourself? Did that ever cross your mind? Was that ever a challenge? And do you have any advice for people who kind of struggle with that? Well, how can I balance with my like 2 kids and be the CTO of this, of IBM or so on?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, it's hard for me to answer directly because I've never been in that position. I don't have children, and I haven't, had the conflict of having to juggle family life. I've really been able to just, focus on myself and my career for, the longest time. But I know that is something that a lot of people struggle with. And I do know a lot of women who have joined, groups where they are, connected to women who are living similar lifestyles. Like there's a group called Chief, which is a women's like leadership organization. And, there's a diverse spectrum of women who certainly fall within that category. And I think it's oftentimes just important to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people who may have similar challenges, to help navigate and to learn, new ideas from. Zack, you and I are in YPO, and I think that's something that's benefited us quite a bit, is that we have a community of people who have either gone through what we've gone through or are going through it too. And being able to, learn and bounce ideas, I think is just always important. So, whether your challenge is, juggling a family or figuring out when to raise more money, I think we just all have challenges. They're just different. And building a network of people that can kind of help you navigate is super important.
Oh, awesome. That makes a lot of sense. So to that, and thinking about some of the challenges, so in your path up, Nancy, what would you say is one of the biggest learnings that you've had? Something that you would do very differently in like the early days of Briogeo?
Yeah, I just think, I didn't come from a beauty background, so I didn't kind of know the who's who in the beauty industry from a talent perspective. And, I probably didn't always make the best decisions early on from a recruiting standpoint, or maybe I worked with recruiters that didn't always have, the company's best interest in mind. It was kind of, quantity over quality. And so that was definitely a struggle in the beginning, was making sure that I could build the right team quick enough to help scale the business. And I think that's where, my private equity partner certainly has been really helpful. But I think if I had to do it all over again, I probably would have really been more intentional about building my network within the industry, to help make sure that I was building the right team at the right time.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And so with that, I'm just going to go to some of the questions that we have. And one here, Nancy, is when you started Briogeo, how did you have it kind of stand out that was in such a crowded industry as like beauty and hair care? How did you kind of overcome that, or how did you approach it?
Yeah, well, at the time, and I think it still is the case in a lot of respects, there aren't a lot of hair care brands that are doing what we're doing from a clean ingredient methodology, and then also serving such a diverse spectrum of hair textures and types. So even, 7 years ago when we launched, that hasn't changed that much. So we are definitely still, dominating a big white space within the category, I would say.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So another question we have is, you had started this business while you were at Goldman, and how did you decide when, okay, now is the right time to make a jump into doing Briogeo full time in terms of, was there a certain sales number or like the product started selling and then you dove in, or how did you kind of make that judgment call?
Yeah. For me, I trust my gut a lot. And I do think that that's one of the skills that I really, learned at Goldman is, over time you start to kind of just get a sense for, what is right and what's wrong. And I think that was also enhanced by the fact that, I am a consumer of Briogeo products. So oftentimes when I'm making decisions, I make the decision just based upon, what Nancy, the consumer, would want. And so, a lot of those types of decisions were really just made, off of gut. And then also too, I've done a lot of focus groups. So oftentimes I'm bringing in other consumers to help me make decisions about a lot of those things, or, in terms of really building a network within the industry, being able to bounce ideas off of, people who have been through what I've been through many times, also helps me to kind of, make the right decision. So it's really a mix of gut, getting input from our, consumer audience, but then also making sure that I'm able to kind of rely on people who have been through it already within my network.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. So can you talk a little bit about, like, there's been a rise in the last few years in terms of like mental self-awareness and mental health care, and also tied into a lot of these beauty products. Is that something you've seen or tied into Briogeo and something that your team is aware of as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the concept of self-care is certainly one that has been on the uprise, especially during COVID. And there are certain beauty rituals within hair care, within skincare, that do allow you to have that kind of almost like at-home spa moment where you're taking out time to really focus on yourself and well-being. So I do think that that's one of the things that has helped to support the category during COVID, is that there are certain types of beauty products that are considered wellness products, and that, they allow you to establish those rituals that really support a healthy and thoughtful wellness routine.
Gotcha. Gotcha. And then lastly, this question from the audience we have here is just, what's been the biggest kind of growing pain point for Briogeo? Was it more sales focused? Was it more product focused, more production focused? Just what would you say has been like the most consistent headache you've seen over the last 7 to 8 years with Briogeo?
Yeah, I mean, luckily we haven't had any consistent headaches, fortunately, or any just, profound, pains or challenges. I would just kind of go back to what I said, about before. There has been some tricky times when we haven't been able to scale the team congruently with our growth. And that's meant that I've had to wear many, many hats and do a lot of different things, which also, is a challenge in itself, because I have to be able to really focus on the strategies to scale the business the right way. And sometimes if you're doing so many different things, it's hard to maintain that focus. So I would say that's probably one of the biggest challenges that we faced, is just getting the right team in place. And again, we've really solved for that in a big way, over the past couple of years, with the support of our private equity team, that's been able to help us in that, hiring and talent journey. And we're just in such a spectacular place with our team. And I'm so grateful, because there's so much opportunity ahead of us. And I feel, so confident and certain that we have what it is we need to really go after every opportunity the right way.
Awesome. That's super helpful, Nancy. So to wrap up here, so in thinking about your path up and your journey, if there was like, I think a lot of times when I think about that, there's a lot of advice people ask for, and oftentimes it comes to like perseverance and never give up and hire great people. If there was one kind of core piece of advice you would give to people who are thinking about their path up and how they can really excel and make it great. Something they may not hear on like how I built this podcast, or something that they're going to read in an everyday article, something that was really specific, you feel like, to your journey. What would that be?
Yeah, I think, the main thing is, make sure that whatever it is you set out to do, it's something that you're passionate about. I think sometimes, people come up with ideas or business plans solely because it's an opportunity to make money. And perhaps that certainly is a goal, but I think you get a lot further when you're able to find a really, kind of winning vision that naturally aligns with your true passions, because the more you're passionate about what it is you're working towards, just the more that you'll be able to effortlessly, really give your full self to that mission. So if you're, in a place where you're trying to figure out what it is you want to do next, really, take some time to explore and think about what you're most passionate about and how you can align your career goals with that passion.
Awesome. So with that, I want to give a big thank you to Nancy Twine for joining us on our inaugural thUp In Conversation event. We have our next In Conversation event taking place on Thursday, December 17th at 11 a.m. Michelle Cordero-Grant, the founder and CEO of Lively. We hope to see you all then. Big thank you again to Nancy, and we will be, posting this later on. And thanks everybody for taking the time to hear from us today. And hopefully we will all be able to get together soon, one day in person.
Yes.
Awesome. Thanks everybody for joining. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nancy.
Bye.